I'd like to open the Wakefield Conservation Commission meeting for January 27th. First up is roll call. Teresa.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
I'm sorry. Yes, here.
Jimmy.
Jimmy,
You're
you're on mute.
You're on mute as well, Jim, and we can't see you. But other than that,
Mm-mm.
Peter.
Peter's here.
Ken.
Is that better?
That's been,
Is that all right?
yeah. Can see
I
your
can see
Ken.
We only see a quarter of you.
You have like a visor half open.
Well, what the, yeah, I know that. That's my shield.
There you go. It's open.
All right,
Okay.
and Savannah.
Yes, up here.
Ken, I got you right.
You did.
Okay. Frank will not be making it tonight, at least not initially. First item is approval of the minutes from January 13th. Are there any corrections or comments? And if not, would somebody like to make a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll make that motion to approve the minutes.
And is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Jimmy,
Where'd he go? We lost him.
We have his camera and his volume. We just don't have Jimmy. So it's either
okay, Peter,
Got
Peter,
disconnected.
yes, approved.
Savannah,
Yes, approved.
Teresa,
Yes.
Ken,
Yes.
and Jimmy.
Yeah.
Okay, minutes are approved for 113. All right, next up, we have Tom Mullen with us. Tom, you want to take it?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think you want to go into executive session. Won't take too long, but we are here to discuss the case of Rosenfield versus Conservation Commission. I want to update the commission, and I'm looking for some direction from the commission.
I believe we have to poll individually to vote to go into executive session and then
Yeah.
return to normal session.
Yeah, that's right. So what I'd suggest is that somebody make the motion to go into executive session to discuss pending litigation, because an open session would be detrimental to the town's litigating position, with the intent of returning to open session.
Now, as a matter of Zoom logistics, the people who should be in executive session would be voting members and our recording secretary and our agent.
Yes.
So non-voting members or public should be put into a waiting room.
Oh, I'm sorry. The public certainly should be put into a waiting room, but non-voting members, no, they're members, they can
Okay.
attend.
All right, so.
Trying to figure out how to do it.
Yeah,
Don't count on me.
yeah, no, I'm just putting members and public members in a waiting room right now.
We need to make the motion first.
Go ahead.
I make Tom's motion, or Dolly Pete. I make a motion to go into executive discussion, session to discuss pending litigation, because to do so would be in the best interest of the town.
With the intent of returning to.
I'm sorry, with the
open
intent of
session.
returning to open session as soon as we finish the discussion of the litigation.
Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, Jim,
Yes.
Ken,
Yes.
Teresa,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Silvana,
Yes.
and I also vote yes. All right, I'm going to admit all 8 people in the waiting room. Okay, for those in the waiting room, welcome, welcome back. We were in executive session. I did need to put you into the waiting room until we return to regular session. Next up, let's see, 732 Clyde Court, DEP 313-613 is postponed until February 10th. So again, Clyde Court is postponed until February 10th. Next up is DEP 313-612. That would be 66 Butler Avenue. And this is a public hearing, continued, abbreviated notice of resource area delineation for 436 linear feet of BVW. Do we have the applicant?
Yes, good evening, Paul Finocchio, representing Heritage Builders and Joe Serenello.
Oh, Paul.
Good evening.
All right, the way we left it off last time was site walk was going to be conducted by the commission, which was done a couple of weeks ago. Is there any discussion about that site walk or what was seen on the site walk? Rebecca, did you also go out to that site? Or was it Elaine?
Elaine went out originally, yep.
And I believe Elaine did not have a problem with the delineation.
That's
Are
the
there
way I
any
am.
notes? Yeah, no issues.
No, nor did we, did Bob, right?
Yeah, I wasn't with the group.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I did my own site walk after.
Yeah, I don't think we had any issues when we went out, right? I'm sorry, Peter was there, Ken was there, right?
No issues.
Issues.
Oh, and Savannah, sorry.
Yeah, I went. No issues.
Okay. No discussion?
No.
All right. So would somebody like to make a motion to accept and approve the resource area delineation for 66 Butler Ave?
I make the motion to approve the ANRAD for 66 Butler Ave, yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Ken?
Yes.
Jimmy?
Yep.
Teresa?
Yes,
Savannah?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
I also vote yes. Okay,
Great. Thank you.
thank you, Paul.
Good night.
All right, we're right back on schedule. Do you need a minute, Rebecca?
Nope,
Okay.
thank you.
Next up is 745 is DEP 313-608. That is 200 to 400 Corner Parkway. Continued public hearing, notice of intent, the construction of a multi-story building within a buffer to BVW, inland bank, bordering land subject to flooding, riverfront, and a discussion of the peer review. Okay, take it away.
Hi there, my name is Mitch Maslenka. I'm a wetland scientist with Goddard Consulting, representing the applicant, CCF Quantipower Parkway Company. And last we had heard from the commission, and the peer review was from a peer review report issued on January 19th, 2022 from BSC, giving several comments on the proposed project. So we've reviewed those comments and we're prepared to discuss anything on that peer review report. So we're going to leave it up to the commission for you guys to ask any questions you may have regarding our site plans and the comments on the report.
Did you comment on their comments? Basically?
No, we have not. We received the comments 2 or 3 days ago. So we haven't had time to put together a formal report with all of
Okay.
our comments written, but we're willing to discuss verbally tonight.
Jim or Rebecca, how would you guys like to proceed with this? Comment by comment, or,
I was hoping that we would go comment by comment. I was hoping that they would be ready to answer each of these comments that BSC has given us in writing. We can talk about it, but I'd like to see the response in writing.
agreed.
So if you can take the first comment, if you want to verbally discuss it.
Sure. Yep. So we can definitely provide you guys with written comments in a memo in the upcoming few weeks. Way you guys have that in writing. But for comment number 1 on the peer review report, I guess I'll pull up the report itself on the screen so you guys can follow.
And we
I
do
just
have,
wanted to take a,
we do have Matt Byrne from BSC here. And also for the record, Ken has recused himself.
Thanks. I just wanted to say hello and introduce myself. Matt Burns, senior ecologist with BSC Group, and happy to be here and helping with the review of this project.
Thank you, Matt.
Yep. Great to have you on the call, Matt. Appreciate your review.
Thanks, Mitch. Good to talk with you.
Yep. So comment number 1 was BSC recommends that the applicant provide an evaluation of soils and depth to bedrock for all proposed wet basin locations on the site. Such an evaluation should address the planning considerations in the structural BMPs, Volume 2, Chapter 2, pages 65 through 67. So I had received a response from Allen and Major Associates, who have been dealing with these evaluations, and their proposed stormwater management system, including all BMPs, have been peer reviewed and approved by the town engineer. So that's how we're going to settle comment number 1. Comment number 2.
Wait a minute.
This is Nick with Allen and Major Associates. I can add to that as well. We performed numerous soil testing out on the site in areas of proposed infiltration to establish the soil types out there, as well as the seasonal high groundwater table.
Yeah.
The wet basins in particular, based on this comment, we haven't performed soil testing in those areas due to the fact that we're not proposing any infiltration there. It's meant to be within the groundwater table. And it's also pretty close to the resource areas. So try not to disturb that area any more than we have to at this time.
The context of that was that Ethan Sneesby from BSC went out to the site and did find hydric soils further outside the BVW line that was approved in 2019 order of conditions.
Mhm.
So that was just putting on the table the concern that it appears that hydric soil conditions are present where your infiltration or your wet basins are proposed. So we wanted you thinking about that and see whether or not you'd looked at that. I had seen the comment back and forth about the commission requesting information on where test pits had been done, and a little pushback from the applicants on providing that. So I think it would be useful for the commission to see, the results of your soil investigations to make sure everything's copacetic.
Yep, and that information was provided months ago in our drainage report. And the location of the testing has been shown on our plans ever since the testing was performed. So I'm not sure if the commission's had a chance to look at any of that information, or it's news to me, I suppose, that no one's reviewed that at this point. I know that the town engineers reviewed it. He was actually out there at the time of the testing. And we both agreed upon an established seasonal high water table to be used throughout the design.
And what was that, 179,
It was elevation 81.
81? I thought. Yeah, I thought I saw it as 179 at some point, maybe.
You might be thinking, so there was a geotechnical report by Haley and Aldrich that discussed elevation 79 as the mean water elevation in Lake Quinnipiac.
Oh, okay, that's what it was. Yeah, you're probably right. All right. So you're saying it's 181 seasonal high water?
I believe it's elevation 81.
I'm sorry, I keep putting one out there. Sorry about that. 81, elevation 81. So you're saying that's the high water mark? I mean, that's the groundwater elevation, right?
Yeah, so just to expand on that, we performed, off the top of my head, I believe it was at least 6, 7, possibly 8 test pits throughout the site in areas of proposed infiltration. And in a lot of those test pits, the seasonal high was established even around like elevation 79 or 80. 81 was a pretty conservative approach. And based on my discussion with the town engineer, that was what he preferred us to use during our design. So that's what we held.
Yeah, Matt, did you see the drainage report that?
No, we specifically were
Right.
not looking at
Right.
the, yeah,
I
so,
got you. Yep.
yeah. No, it was more really just to put on a table that hydric soils were seen up gradient of the wetland line, and to make sure that was understood.
Yeah, so the intent of these wet basins is to actually have standing water in them at all times. I think we estimate around a foot, 6 inches to a foot of water at any given time just sitting in the basin. And that's what they're actually designed to do to help treat and capture some of the sediments and allow them to settle out before they pass on into the wetland resource areas. And they're really designed to only handle runoff from the parkway itself. The majority of the site stormwater runoff is being captured in underground chambers or infiltration basins that are set minimum 2 feet above the seasonal high water table.
Thanks for that.
And Mitch, I think the second comment kind of goes hand in hand with that. I don't know if I don't see it on my screen. Do you mind scrolling to that? Yeah, so the BSC recommends that the operation and maintenance plan be developed to ensure long-term functioning of the proposed system. Such plan should be reviewed as part of the permitting process under the Wetlands Protection Act. So yeah, as part of our drainage report in section 2, it is just that. It's an operation and maintenance plan. And it was reviewed in great detail, from my understanding, by Bill Renaud, the town engineer. And he had no issue with it. And we went through that whole peer review process, peer review memo back and forth, and made some adjustments to the design based on some of the feedback we received. So I think at this point, hopefully we're beyond that. But if there are any specific questions to the O&M plan, I'm happy to answer them.
I didn't have any. I just, usually would see that, but because we weren't involved with that component of the project review, then
Yeah, no,
I wasn't
understand.
aware of it, so.
I have a question for you. I was looking at this, started to look at this drainage report, and you put existing loading for nutrients at 176.14. How was that number developed? Where did that come from?
So let me go to it. So the nutrient load is based off the use. It's based off the use of the site and then whether or not a portion of that use is impervious or I guess the ground cover. So it's based on use and ground cover. And the EPA comes up with, they have several tables that outline how you, what the nutrient loads are based on the ground type and the use. And so you just multiply it by the area for each to come up with a loading.
Multiply the area by what?
You multiply the area. So on any given portion of the site, you would calculate an area. You know the
Yeah.
use, the existing use is,
Yeah.
and
So it's say 50 square feet times what gives you the number? Or is this just a?
there's a
result of-
table, there's a table in the EPA that the EPA provides.
And what does it say? I mean, I still don't understand. So
It's-
where is the
it's-
table? Where can I look at this table?
It's on the EPA's website. I mean, it's a little bit convoluted. I can send you some sample calculations if you'd like, but
Can you send
I
me
can
the
assure you that
calculation? Can you send me the calculation that got you to this number then? Maybe that would work. And then for yourself, you did 34.47, proposed load. So that's a big change. I guess I'm questioning, how does that relate to the planting and the uptake of pollutants by the plants? Do you actually have to test the water to see if this is working? How do you know if it's actually working?
it's based on data that the EPA provides. The town uses the same data when they're calculating their phosphorus and nitrogen removal.
Yeah.
And I worked with Bill Renault and Tim Wilson in the engineering department and vetted all these calculations out in great detail.
But it doesn't really tell you what, like, I mean, if you did this area and say your wet basins or your bioretention area, if you didn't put any plants in this at all, would you still come up with the same number?
Yes, well,
Well, that doesn't.
it's based off of the BMP that you're using. So there's multiple factors. It's a pretty, it's somewhat complex of a calculation to get to the endpoint of what the nutrient load reduction is. You start off by calculating a load based on the use and the ground cover type. And then once you establish that load, you size any sort of BMP, whether it be an infiltration basin, a bioretention area, a wet basin, and each of those BMPs have different removal rates that are determined by the EPA.
Okay.
And so based
But
on
you're
the
not-
sizing of those and the amount of water volume that you can hold in each of those basins, there's a chart that shows you if you can hold an inch of runoff, you get 30% phosphorus or nitrogen removal, depending on the table that you're looking at. And that's how those reductions are calculated.
So it would be 30% out of the water that's coming off the site, right?
30% of the contributing runoff, correct. So there's,
You must have that calculation done. Can you just send me a copy of that? So
it's the PDF of the Excel file is right there. I can send you the Excel file if you'd like. But it's really all in the Excel file. There's no hand calculation.
I just want to find some way to verify what you're telling me. And I just don't know.
If you
I'm
give me-
unsure about what I'm talking about, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, it's a little bit complex. Let me,
But I think I need to understand it because I find that, I mean, that's a number, but is it real? Do you really reduce that? I mean,
well, those are numbers based off studies that have been performed by the EPA. Whether or not you get that exact amount of treatment at the end of the day, you'd have to do testing out there periodically, and it would take some time to establish that data. It's not something that happens overnight.
well, that's my concern because it seemed to me like we're gonna put all these plants and stuff out there with the whole intent. Actually, it seems like the intent of this whole project is to uptake all the pollutants in the land surrounding the building.
Yep.
And I assume that you're doing that through plants and
the
primarily
plants certainly help.
using the best management practices that you did, because the two that you picked out seemed appropriate for what you're doing. So,
Yep. So can I share my screen for a second?
yeah.
Can you see this?
Yes.
Yeah. You sent those in your stormwater report, but I couldn't read it. It was just so grainy, and I need someone to explain these numbers.
Yeah, so the tables that we used, these are the treatment tables. There's a bunch of them depending on the BMP that you're using, the infiltration rate, capacity of the soil that you're going through.
Yeah.
And the tables that we used for our calculations based on the
Yeah.
BMPs and the soil types on this specific site,
Right.
I copied those tables onto our Excel file.
Yeah, so you put them in the stormwater report, because I'm looking at it, right? That's where I got the number.
I did.
Yeah.
And so this whole PDF, this is in attachment 3 to Appendix F. You can find this online. It's provided by the EPA, and it goes through the whole process of how to calculate the nutrient load reduction for any given site. So these are the loading numbers.
Okay.
If it's a commercial industrial use, direct connected impervious, you're going to have a nitrogen load of 15 pounds per acre per year. So you would multiply that number times the area for that given use and cover
Yeah.
type.
Yeah.
If you have pervious surfaces, you're going to use these numbers based on the soil type, A, B, C,
Right.
D soils.
Right.
And that's how those loads are generated. So right now we have a commercial industrial existing use,
Yeah.
multiplied the area of the site, did all the takeoffs for impervious versus pervious cover to come up with that nutrient load. And that's the existing load. There's minimal treatment out there right now. It all just goes off into the resource areas.
Right.
And then we came back and established a proposed load based on all residential use,
Mhm.
broke that up into impervious versus pervious surfaces.
Yeah.
So that would be the load without any treatment.
Okay, but you're assuming because the buildings and the pavement wouldn't enter into it, or?
Well,
You're
no,
saying-
so you got to first establish the load. So once you know the loading that would take place just based off the change in use, imagine if we didn't put any BMPs on site,
Yeah.
you establish that load, and then you go and design your stormwater management system, and you use these
Is all
charts.
that, wait a minute, is all that you just scrolled through, is that the method that you use? Do I have that in this report?
No, this is provided by the EPA. This is just a guideline.
Can you just send me that guideline to Rebecca or something? I can look at it later.
Sure.
See, the thing I'm concerned about is that these are like numbers that we're not sure even are gonna attain any of these numbers, right? In reality, I mean, we are striving to reduce the pollutant intake into the lake. That's a primary objective. And
Yep.
this seems like we're just getting and satisfying a number,
Well,
satisfying.
this is the way
But-
you design it. It's
I
based
know,
off
but you
of
don't,
research.
but I don't see where you really can say that you have actually reduced it, like unless you tested the water. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. That's That's the only way to know for sure and to know exactly how much.
And I'm thinking too, like in the future, if this project changes, someone might have a different idea of what's beautiful around this lake and decide to fill in all those or pull all the plants out of those basins. And then what have we done to our pollutant loading? I worry about that. Do you see what I'm saying? That's what I'm.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but I mean, there's a million things that could.
No, I know, but
I
practically
think if you
speaking.
could probably condition it upon that the
Well,
plantings need to be in there that are provided on our proposed drawings.
Well, yeah, and they have to be maintained. Like if the plant dies, you got to replace it. I didn't know if you took so much plant material and with all this, say this set amount of plant material that you could assume that you get X amount of potassium or nitrogen removal. And then you figured out how many plants you needed to do that. And that's how you get your planting scheme. But that's evidently not the way it works.
No, so this is a chart that shows it's kind of lumped in. So if you're using like a subsurface infiltration, they tell you to use the chart for infiltration trench. If you're using bioretention, they have you use the biofiltration chart, and these are the different charts. And so the plantings that are required in each of these BMPs are outlined in the Mass DEP handbook.
Yeah, I saw
So
that.
this is kind of building off of that. So
Right.
they're assuming that you're already constructing your
Right.
BMP correctly. And
Right,
if-
they tell you what plants you should be putting in there. There's like 3 pages full of plants that you can go in. And I'm assuming that your landscaping people have, they're consulting that list to figure out what plants are gonna go in there or what would be best in there, right?
Yep, that's correct.
Well, let me ask you something else. I noticed when reading the stormwater management for the 2 methods that you're using, I think one was wet basins and the other was bioretention areas. So the wet basins, they were talking about a very deep hole, like they said at least 1.5 to 2 meters deep. But they also mentioned that they had shallow methods. So which method would you say that you're using? Because some of them seem like they're going to be in the water table. That's
It's
why I was
a-
questioning the water table elevation.
They're designed to be in the water table by design.
But the west basins are open water and they're vegetated along the banks. Is that correct?
The west, can you repeat that? Sorry.
The wet basins,
Yeah,
they're designed to have standing water in them.
that's correct.
So, but they are talking about depths that put you in the groundwater.
Yes.
Okay, unless you have another method, which I think they were in the regulations there. I think they were hinting that there's another method, but they really didn't go into detail about it. Do you know if there's, maybe I'm guessing that you're using a different method. The other thing I was concerned about was that they talk about liners on the bottom of these basins. And I didn't see liners in that section that you have for the wet basins.
Yeah, because it's in the groundwater. Typically, my understanding is that a liner would be used if, say, you weren't in the groundwater and you wanted to hold water in that basin,
But
and you
the-
wanted to
the
prevent it
intent-
from infiltrating into the ground.
Right, but the intent of that is to hold back the pollutants. Is to hold back soluble pollutants, which are the things that I worry about. So if you don't put the lining in there, you're not going to retain the soluble pollutants until, well, you won't, you're passing them right through. So you can't take any credit for phosphorus and nitrogen removal if you're taking away the ability to store it there. And
It
I
is
don't know how
being
that
stored
tie-
there.
I don't know how
It's-
that
it's-
ties into your other.
It's being stored there. It's not passing into the wetlands until it fills up to a certain elevation.
No, but it's gonna mix with the water in the groundwater table. It's not, that's the way it works.
But it allows, sitting in that wet basin, it allows time for those solubles to settle out.
Yes, but that's only with the liner. And if you don't put the liner in, this is what I'm figuring from this. If you don't put the liner in, then it can't retain the pollutants. The pollutants are gonna mix in with the groundwater and then travel out that way. Do you,
I think, I mean, I'm not sure what else to say. the town engineers reviewed this.
Well, I don't.
Engineer
The
to
town
engineer,
engineer
we've
is,
reviewed
the
it in
town
depth.
engineer is reviewing it really for engineering reasons. We're trying to look at conservation issues.
No, and he was very adamant, Bill Renault, I should say, he was very adamant that we would provide the 80% nutrient load removal at a
Well, that was
minimum.
for, that wasn't for soluble. That was for, that was for sand and stuff like that. That's not- that was not-
No, it's, so yeah, you're correct. There is an
Not
80%
for soluble,
PSS removal.
it's not for soluble because soluble can't be taken out with that method. Soluble pollutants are in the water itself. It's not attached to sand or anything else. So I mean, that 80% is talking about something other than soluble pollutants.
Are there any, I don't know the, construction standards for wet basins and so forth, but is there a body of literature, scientific studies, things of that nature to get at Jim's question? How do these wet basins that are in communication with the groundwater protect the interests of the Wetlands Protection Act? How do they function to protect the quality of groundwater?
A good way to put it, yeah.
And that's a question. I don't know the answer to whether, that's not a rhetorical question. I'm asking if you're aware of science that supports the
So-
conclusion.
So here's
Pardon?
the wet basins in the DEP handbook.
Nick, it's not sharing correctly.
Oh, sorry. Can you see this?
Got it.
So this is in the DEP handbook. It goes into discussion how the wet basins are sited on a project, how they're sized, how they function, how they're maintained.
Right.
And all of this was reviewed as part of a peer review memo. I can pull it up.
So it did call for a liner on that first page, it looked like. Polyvinyl liner, 6-inch clay.
Well, getting back to that, you know what, I would love to see if you could get us a couple of sections through these wet basins and this retention, this bioretention area. So I can see it better with
Here you
the
go.
section.
I have it. We provided it on a couple submissions ago.
Okay. You sent it
Here's the
to
wet
us?
basin. So you've got your Parkway up here.
I don't have, I have just a piece of paper in front of me. I don't see anything.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know why I keep sharing it like this. Can you see this?
Yeah, right.
It's on sheet C105A. So, I mean, it's very simple.
When did you give this to us?
This was submitted, I think about a month ago.
So, okay, so it's not part of the original submission.
No, because during the original submission, you had asked for a cross section. And so we
We
provided the
asked for-
cross section on the next,
Yeah, we asked
submission.
for a cross section going through the buildings and all. Is that what you gave us? Well, you haven't given us anything yet, because I just saw this, and this is the first time I've seen this.
During
Um,
our first hearing, you had asked for a cross-section through
Yeah,
the
right,
flood
I
basin.
remember, I remember.
Yep, and so for our next submission, we included this cross-section.
But see, are you calling this a best, it's not really a wet basin though, right? Because it really doesn't, it doesn't kind of go along with the regulations, does it?
No, it's a hybrid approach to a wet basin.
Okay.
And we're taking reduced credit for these wet basins around the Parkway.
Well, what is the, how much is the reduction and what, from what?
Based on the EPA calculation. So I can find, just bear with me for 1 second. I don't know why this thing. I'm gonna pull up a peer review memo from the
I have, if it's.
the town
Bill-
engineer.
If it's Bill's peer review, I've already read it.
Yeah, and we discussed this exact
Yeah,
topic.
But that doesn't mean that there wouldn't be more questions. I mean, that's why we're having a hearing.
Yep, and I'm trying to answer that question.
Because you label these different things on your plans. You don't call them the same thing.
Well, they're not all the same thing.
Well, that's what's getting confusing because I don't know which one is supposed to be best management practice and what, aren't they all best management practices that you're using?
Yep.
So
Yeah,
these
they're all best management practices. The chambers are a best management practice, the bioretention is a best management practice, the infiltration basin is, and the wet basin.
okay. But they don't match up with what they're saying they should look like.
This is not the correct one.
Is there a sediment forebay prior to the wet basin?
Oh, that was my next
Yes.
question. Yeah.
Why can't I find this?
We had asked a while ago if you had a site that we could look at that you've done all this type of stuff on. You had said there's a lot of sites that you've done. So could you get us a site that we could look at and, close by maybe so that we could see what to expect?
Yep, I have that as well. If you just do one question at a time.
I got another question when you get a chance.
Okay, so here we go. 0428. Can you see this?
Yes.
All right, so as far as the wet basins not meeting the exact requirements of the handbook, and the reason behind that is obviously because of the space constraints between the Parkway and the resource areas. So this is the comment from Bill Renault's office. He says, none of the proposed wet basins meet the requirements in the Mass Stormwater Handbook, but it is understood that this is a redevelopment aiming to treat stormwater runoff to the maximum extent practicable.
Yeah.
Even so, there's a couple areas that need to be addressed, including filter strip design, inlet proximity to emergency overflows, depth of wet ponds, and minimum required surface area of wet ponds. Provide analysis on how wet ponds were designed and what credit is being taken for each condition that doesn't meet Mass Stormwater Handbook requirements. And I don't know if you've seen this response memo before. This was actually provided during the ZBA process. But we responded, the wet basins have been sized and designed to the maximum extent practicable given existing resource area restrictions. Therefore, the proposed ponds are a hybrid model to the standard wet pond defined by the Mass Handbook. Resource restrictions include horizontal and vertical proximity to wetlands, floodplains respectively. All wet ponds are located entirely within the floodplain and span from edge of existing curb around the parkway to the edge of the wetlands or previously disturbed area within the 25-foot no disturb. The design and intent is to intercept pollutants from the parkway and capture them within the wet ponds to allow sediment and nutrients to settle out prior to discharge to the surrounding drainage swale and lake. All permittable real estate between the back of existing curb to the edge of the wetlands or previously disturbed areas is now cited as a wet pond. The majority of the existing parkway surrounding the development is located within the floodplain. In order to maintain existing flood storage volumes, the low high points within the parkway have been maintained. Let me kind of skim through. Let's see. Strips. Okay, the next page has the breakdown. The emergency overflows within each of the wet ponds have been positioned to match existing outfall locations to the bordering wetlands. Some of these locations are within close proximity to the filter strips where stormwater enters the wet ponds. Under normal circumstances, this is not advisable, but it is currently proposed to match existing drainage patterns and minimize disturbance to wetland resource areas and their associated buffers. Swales are proposed to direct stormwater away from the emergency overflows and into the ponding area of each pond, maximizing the hydraulic retention time. There are several design criteria outlined in the Mass Stormwater Handbook for a traditional wet pond that are unattainable for this development and therefore have been met to the maximum extent practicable. And that was that table you saw in the handbook earlier. We were kind of flipping through those pages. There was a table there.
Yeah.
This is that exact table. We just copied it over and I went through the criteria and then what's actually being proposed. So max drainage area, handbook requires greater than 20 acres unless sufficient groundwater flow. We're proposing the wet basins, they're located within the seasonal high groundwater and the floodplain, i.e. sufficient groundwater flow expected. Permanent pool volume greater than 2 times the water quality volume is required. We have a 21,000 cubic foot pool volume, which is greater than the water quality volume, which is only around 6,000 cubic feet. So it's 3.5 times greater. So it well meets that standard. Minimum pool surface area, greater than 1/4 acre. We have about 0.37 acres, which is obviously meets that requirement. Minimum length to width ratio, greater than 3 to 1. We obviously have irregular shapes, but the length of these is greater than the width. Mean permanent pool depth, 3 to 6 feet. We're only proposing 1.5 feet, given the space constraints and how quickly we can grade that slope down. Max permanent pool depth, 8 feet. Obviously, we don't have that issue because we're not even close to 8 feet. Max pool slopes, 3 to 1. We're proposing 3 to 1. Max safety bench, 2 to 1. Not applicable. We don't have enough space. Same with the perimeter access way and perimeter vegetated buffer. We just don't have the space between the edge of the parkway and the wetlands. As for the sediment forebay is required. This was an old memo. We were proposing the vegetated filter strips with the stone diaphragm, where we now have sediment forebays at all but one of the wet basins. Pool drain, max drain time 40 hours. It's not applicable. And this is where we get into what sort of reductions in credits we're taking based on the EPA's calculations. So because the proposed wet ponds does not meet all the criteria outlined in the handbook, only a portion of the nitrogen and phosphorus load reduction credit has been utilized. The load reduction credit is assigned based on the depth of runoff captured by the wet ponds. The wet ponds have been sized to capture greater than 2 inches of each contributing watershed, which equates to a nitrogen and phosphorus load reduction of 40% and 63% respectively for a traditional wet pond configuration. Because the permanent pool depth proposed, 1.5 feet, is only half the minimum required by the handbook, which is 3 feet, only half the capacity, 1 inch, of the wet pond has been considered for nitrogen and phosphorus load reduction credits. Therefore, each wet pond utilizes a nitrogen and phosphorus load reduction credit of 32% and 53% respectively for a 1 inch capacity. Now you might say 32 isn't half of 40 and 53 isn't half of 63. But if you look at To find the drainage report. Let me share this. This goes back into, oh, sorry, this is the, oh, actually, it's on this sheet. They're not in there.
Okay, but aren't you really getting these? I mean, you've modified every standard out there to make this thing fit. So I don't know what to say about that.
Let me show you. Let me just finish this sentence real quick. So here's your wet pond.
Yeah.
So we sized these ponds to hold a 2-inch volume, which gives you the 63 and the 40%. We're only taking half the credit, so 1 inch. So if you hold 1 inch, you get 53 and 32% reduction. That's where those numbers come from.
Okay. But let me ask you something. If you reduce, what am I trying to say? If you made them smaller, could you stay away from stay further away from the wetland and still meet these requirements?
I mean, theoretically,
The only
you
thing
could
I'm
make them
thinking
as-
is, like, I mean, you right out to the limit everywhere you could go, everywhere around the building. I understand, why you're doing that, but if there was a way to stay further away from the wetland with your alterations, could it be achieved?
in some locations, I suppose you could pull these, make them smaller, but
Yeah.
then it kind of gets they're pretty small at this point. So it gets, you're not really getting much treatment, and what is really the purpose of them at that point?
Well,
And then you're better off just letting it dump right into the wetlands as it does today with no treatment, and you're gonna get all that sediment
well,
into the resource areas.
wouldn't it just mean that there might be a little bit more volume in the retention areas than you would
No.
have had?
You mean
No.
in these retention, like the chambers and the
Not in
infiltration
the,
basin?
not so much the chambers, but the wet basins, yeah, in the front of the building. Like, you've got this is all wet basin in front of the building, correct? Or some modification of the wet
It's an
basin.
infiltration basin. It's meant to be dry. It'll be dry and infiltrate.
Is that getting planted with vegetation along the banks?
Yes. Yep, we went over all the landscaping at a previous hearing. Ian Ramey from Copley Wolf went into pretty in-depth conversation and discussion on the planting plan for the entire site. But my point is, you can't get the water from the Parkway over here. You just can't do it. The elevations don't work. That's the whole purpose and reason for constructing these wet basins. They only handle runoff from the Parkway because the Parkway is within a floodplain. You can't raise the Parkway to get it to drain anywhere else, or you're filling the floodplain without any compensatory flood storage.
Mm-hmm.
And really the only mitigation that you can propose here are these wet ponds at the edge, at the backside of the Parkway.
Yeah.
The alternative to this is to provide no wet basins, which would be less work for the developer. It's easier. I mean, you don't have to design anything, but you're sending all of those pollutants, all of the TSS, all of that continues to go in and clog these wetlands.
Yeah.
So these are meant to benefit the lake. And I understand they are close to the resource areas, but it's all done to benefit the lake and the property as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Well, I could say something, but I don't think I will. Let me ask you something else. I know when you did your first, I looked at the plan you have for your, you have this broken up into drainage areas, right?
Yep.
One of those other plans.
Yeah,
And
I can bring it up.
my question is, on the northern end of the building, there's that one area where the parking lot is always flooded when it rains.
Yep.
And you've got a drainage area in there. What are you doing to maximize the discharge points that are existing so that we have the same volume of water heading into these areas? Because that's a wetland over there. And I don't know what you're doing with how I'm sure if I studied this thing, you've got pipes and manholes and stuff like that everywhere. It would tell me, but are we taking water away from there that might affect the wetland's ability to sustain itself?
Nope. So right now, all of the runoff that comes from the existing site, the
Yeah,
ponds in this back corner, like
Yep.
everyone's aware of.
yeah,
There's a little overflow in here that goes into that back swale.
right.
That back swale fills up and it goes
Right,
counterclockwise around the site.
Yeah.
It doesn't reach this wetland.
No,
As you
no,
can see-
I know that. I know that. But that is a wetland as it runs along the line of the building. That's a wetland there, isn't it? All
This
along.
right here, this is a wetland.
No, on the other, go up to the top of the page where you had that little, I can't show you on mine. Yeah, right in that area there. Isn't that a wetland that's running along the fence parallel to the highway?
Yes,
Okay, so the water that comes out of this area that we were just talking about goes down, like you said, flows along the building. That, how much, you've got this one, this is the proposed drainage areas, right?
yes,
This map that you're showing. So on the existing, it shows a big area in here that feeds this one spot where it goes along the building. Have you tried to like maintain
about this?
somewhat? Yeah, there. So does this drainage area that you're showing now represent the same volume that would go to it in the existing conditions?
no,
No,
it's being
so,
reduced because it's being captured on site and infiltrated into the groundwater.
okay, but is that a good thing to do?
Yes, I mean, yeah, you're treating it and putting it into the groundwater rather than letting it discharge directly overland into the wetland, carrying all the pollutants.
Well, that, it goes into the, so you took away the, where does that discharge now, that area that you're showing me now? Where does that discharge to?
So within the Parkway, at the lower elevation,
Yeah,
there's a high point right where my cursor is here.
yeah.
Kind
I
of
see it.
climbs up to the driveway entrance, and then it goes back down.
Yeah,
All of that goes into a vegetated filter strip right here. This is the one vegetated filter strip that we have on site, and it's mainly because we don't have room to provide a sediment forebay in this area.
mhm,
So water goes into this filter strip, comes into the wet basin. It
Yeah.
starts to occupy the wet basin. It fills up. It can fill up all the way into the back here. Eventually, it'll reach about 6-inch to 12-inch ponding depth and
Yeah.
overflow as it does today into this
into the
drainage swale.
Okay, so how much so if you're trying to match volumes going into these certain areas, how close would you say you are between the existing and the proposed drainage areas for that location?
For
You know what I mean?
overland volume,
No, I'm saying that you showed me how the street goes down, and when it gets to this vegetated area, it goes into the brook along the highway chain link fence, right?
yep,
So all that so you've got another dry basin here, or wet basin here, that's parallel to the road, to the building. That water goes into it as well, right? That goes into this one vegetated area, this triangular
This-
piece that you said you couldn't put a forebay.
yes, this up here.
Yeah, well, it's actually over to your right. I guess what I'm trying to say is the proposed drainage area that's on the curve of this road
Mhm.
is that area going into the wet basin or the vegetated basin that you couldn't put the forebay in? Does that go into that? I think you said yes.
Yes, P1C right here, this little
That whole
chunk of the
thing, right.
parkway goes into this wet basin.
Okay. All right. Okay, I guess the only thing I'm still stuck on is how do we determine if we've actually got nitrogen and phosphorus reduction through all these plants, or how can we make sure that the plants or the vegetation that's on the site, because there's an extensive amount of vegetation going in here, all these amazing. How do you assure ourselves that's giving us a reduction in those pollutants? That this project isn't adding pollutants to the, I know you can technically show it because you've done it. You've shown me that through the regulations, you can get a number that says it's true. But I'm just wondering how you show it in real life.
You would require it would require testing of the water, the runoff water, numerous testing.
Is there something you can think about and maybe possibly share an idea with us to?
I mean, I don't think that's feasible or reasonable to do. We've proven that based on the calculations that are required by the
Yeah.
EPA and the
Yeah.
state, we show that we meet these nutrient load reductions.
Right.
And your own town engineer has reviewed these in depth.
Right.
He agrees with the calculations.
No, I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying, but all I'm saying is that you yourself said that you really don't know if you're removing any pollutants. You really don't know. And that was, I thought, the whole idea behind this
I mean,
idea.
you could be
It's
skeptical about anything,
No,
really.
but once this thing is built, we're stuck with it.
This is done by the EPA performs studies and they track this information. They do the testing. That's how they come up with these numbers. And we use
Okay.
these numbers, this data, to perform these calculations, to design these systems. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm not sure what else you'd like us to do.
test the water.
It's more, I mean,
I mean, just because it's hard, I don't know if it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do something. I understand what you're saying, because yeah, you're right. All these numbers are getting created by professionals and it should work. I have to think about it longer.
I would have to imagine that there are published papers that are the foundation for those EPA.
You know, it's funny because I've been looking through papers. I've been looking for articles about phosphorus and nitrogen removal, and I really haven't found anything that, I mean, the most I've seen so far is what we have in this stormwater management handbook. It actually gave you some numbers. Some of the things they don't give you any credit at all. Some of the man-made structures that they're putting in, but they do particularly on the two that you're using, show reduction in pollutants. Soluble pollutants is what I'm concerned about, not so much unsoluble pollutants. But I guess I'm gonna think on it a little bit longer. I'm done. Anyone else want to ask questions? I don't know. Sorry if you had to go over stuff that you went before, but I'm sure the first time around with you guys was almost like a preliminary introduction of what was going on. And I always.
I'm happy.
expected
I
that.
appreciate the questions. I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah. Okay. Does anyone else have questions they want to ask?
Can you show the locations of the test pits on the site plan?
Yep.
Thank you.
Let me pull it up. Can you see my screen? Can you see this?
Yes.
So there's a test pit here. You can set, it's blocked off by the the text. There's one performed here, the H&A. There's test pits here, H&A TP3, water at this, for instance, they established the seasonal high at 77 at this location. Like I had said, there was a couple that were much lower. Go to the next sheet. H&A TP5, water at 80.2. This is the one we actually, sorry, this isn't the one, but this is TP6 at 80.1. There's H&A TP7 at 80.3. Should be another one up here. Oh, you know what? I think it falls underneath the building. But those are some of them. There's another one, TP4. So you can see they were done all the way throughout where we're proposing the infiltration on the site.
You know, that brings me to another question. You know, which way is, do you know which way the groundwater is flowing?
What do you mean by that? Like
Which
The-
way it's flowing from your property? Is it?
the groundwater itself?
Yeah, I mean, it could be flowing.
I don't know the
over.
answer to that question. I would assume it flows towards the lake.
It could be towards what's called, what that no-name stream is. as
We haven't
well.
performed any sort of
Yeah.
groundwater migration analysis. It's
Okay. Another question I have for you is, all of these wet basins get vegetated, right?
correct.
Is there, and some of them now you're saying are not deep, then they're, you know, maybe 1.5 feet deep, something along those lines. Is that correct? These wet
Yes.
basins. Okay. So how do you, and they're at different elevations, right? I mean, some are down low, some are up high.
The wet basins,
Yep, the wet basins.
they're all pretty much around the same elevation. Bottom of this one's at 80. Berm's
Yeah,
at 82.5. We have this one at 80. Berm's at 82.5. They should all be right around the same elevation. 80,
okay.
82.5.
So are you gonna, in times of drought or stuff like that, are you gonna, do you need to provide water to these plants that are down there? Because you're well above the, I mean, what'd you say was the 100-year flood elevation? 83?
81 was the established seasonal high
81.
water.
Oh, that's the groundwater high. What's the flood elevation? 83, right?
83.
83 and 81. So if you're at 81 and all your plants are at and the groundwater is at 81. I guess my question would be, do you have to supplement these areas with water at dry times to keep the plants alive, or will they survive anyways?
No, so there's no significant plant vegetation proposed like in the basin, the bottom of the basin where there's going to be standing water.
No, but there would be up on the banks, right? And you would
Yeah, I believe Copley Wolf is proposing some wisps in there along the banks.
Right. Okay, so you don't foresee any problem with, you know, maintaining the plant's health?
I'm not a landscape architect, so I can't really comment too much on that. But I don't know, maybe Mitch may have a better understanding, or I don't think Ian's on this call, unfortunately.
Okay.
So from what I've seen on the landscaping plan, they're proposing several species of trees at 1.5 inch caliber.
Mhm.
So they're relatively young trees. And the trees themselves will be able to tolerate drought conditions, but it may not hurt for landscapers in dry times to go out there and supplement those plantings with some water.
So-
Can never hurt.
If the bottoms of these basins, like in the ones that are on the, Quannapowitt side of the building, are they just gonna be mulched? Or
Which basins are we talking about? Are you talking about this basin in the back?
I'm talking about, okay, stop you moving with your hand there, go down well, actually, you're in the right spot. You're in the right spot. Those there, right. So the bottom of those is what, 81.5 or something like that?
No. These are
80.5?
infiltration basins. They're at 83. They're above the groundwater table. They're meant to be dry. And
Okay.
these will have plantings in them.
Okay. So the whole bottoms of those are gonna be planted. I'm trying to visualize what this is gonna look like when it's completed. Are these high plants like grasses and stuff, or are they?
Yeah, I mean, Copley Wolf went over a pretty in-depth presentation on them with
Well, not
renderings. and,
really. Yeah,
I don't have that information with me tonight.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think it was that in-depth because I wouldn't have this question if it was. I think he went over everything kind of. Probably did it in an hour. Okay, okay, so those are dry. Those are completely dry. And they're gonna be like little gullies, like a dry river. Is that the same thing on the highway side of the building? No, those are wet down there on that side.
Everything on the outside of the Parkway, these
Yeah.
are all wet basins.
Yeah.
Because they're within the floodplain.
Yep,
These are bioretention areas within the courtyards.
yep,
We have the underground chambered systems underneath the parking,
yep,
and we have the large infiltration basin along the back of the site.
yep.
The only thing that's meant to hold water are the wet basins beyond the Parkway.
And the bioretention areas, they don't hold water?
No. They're actually equipped with under drains. They're more of they're considered a treatment BMP as opposed to an infiltration BMP.
So it's not a
So-
bioretention basin then, really? Does it really qualify as a bioretention basin?
Oh yeah, it's a filtering bioretention basin, not an infiltration bioretention basin. There's two different types.
Okay,
So these are meant to treat the first flush that goes into
Yeah.
them and discharge into the underground chambered systems.
and that system goes around into all these Caltech chambers, this big bank of Caltech chambers.
Correct.
Yeah.
I want to get one day like finally, we get like a pro version of them.
So I should know this, but I'm gonna ask anyways. So you have regular manholes scattered throughout this property, right?
Yep.
Is that a system by itself? Like, how does it, what does that empty into? I'm sure it's on the plan, but it's easy if you just show me.
Like these manholes?
Yeah, you've got a bunch of manholes.
Yep, so they're catch basins. So these catch basins,
And that's dirty water, basically, right? We're gonna say it's dirty water because it's gonna be on from,
yep,
this car park there, correct?
yep.
Yeah, so that's dirty water. So what are you doing with the dirty water?
So the dirty water gets captured into the catch basin,
Yeah,
deep sump catch basin, 4-foot sumps. They're equipped with the
Yep.
hoods on the outlets
yeah,
to help trap the floatables and any
Yep.
sort of petroleum-based products. Goes into the drain manhole, and
Yep.
they're connected into these isolator rows. And those isolator rows are designed to capture that first flush of pollutants before
Okay.
it ultimately overflows into the rest of the chambered system where it can more easily infiltrate right into the ground.
Okay, so those are Caltech chambers also then, is that right?
Yeah, they're not Caltech, they're Stormtech.
But
It's the same
something,
thing.
something,
Yeah.
that style, right?
Yep.
Basically, is what I'm saying. So, and that's gonna go, now you're above the groundwater there, correct?
Yep.
So those are gonna flow down to the groundwater and then filter through whichever direction the groundwater is moving. Which we
Yep.
don't know.
And under large storm events,
Yeah, then it
when
goes into the
these,
other.
when these
chamber.
infiltration chambers get overwhelmed,
Right,
I believe there's 3 outlet control structures. You can see this
Yeah.
manhole here.
yeah,
It's connected to a larger pipe that
Right.
dumps out into a level spreader that goes into
Right.
these infiltration basins out back. And there's 3 of them. There's one here, one
Yeah.
here, and there's
Yeah.
one more on the other side of building or between building 2.
okay. All right,
And then, of course, everything's intertwined and connected. So
I noticed that.
under even larger storms, the infiltration basin will fill up and it will maintain the same drainage patterns that exist today. It overflows at this emergency spillway here.
Yeah.
And then discharges into the existing 8-inch HDPE pipes that pass below the existing walkway
Right.
and into the lake.
Right,
I mean, those are pretty large storm events to
right.
have it do that, but it is there as like a fail safe.
Yeah. So do you have any? Never mind. So that's what I was getting at for the, all right, never mind, I'm done right now.
Anything else about the resource areas? I didn't mean to hijack this whole thing with stormwater.
Yeah,
Mitch, I don't know if you want to continue on going through the comments.
Sure.
That was the purpose of this whole hearing.
well, was the purpose, but, it's also we gotta, look at everything.
Mitch, if I could offer a sort of a, at this point, the next, I think it's 8 comments, really kind of lumped together in thinking about the buffer zone. And, there's really very little intact buffer zone on the site, given the existing conditions. Hello. And this is, this project will have, pretty significant impact on what remains. So those next comments, I think it's 3 through 11, really focus on the science of buffer zones, how buffer zones function to protect adjacent wetlands. And that function and the comments can be broken down into sort of 3 main groupings. The way that buffer zones protect water quality, the way they protect flood control and storm damage, and then their function in the provision of wildlife habitat. So that kind of is an overview summary of the next, sort of big chunk of comments. The BVW section of the Wetlands Protection Act allows a commission to look at the impacts that would be expected in the adjoining wetlands when buffer zones are impacted by a project, and kind of asks us to look at the extent to which adverse impacts are avoided, the extent to which adverse impacts can be minimized, and then the extent to which mitigation measures are being proposed. So rather than going through individually, because they're sort of repetitive on those 3 different categories, we can talk about buffer zone impacts more broadly with respect to BVW.
Yeah,
really,
I'd be happy to summarize.
Yeah, good. I'll leave it at that.
Yep. So I checked all those out, noticed your comments requesting, how did we minimize unavoidable impacts? Some of those may be the vertical construction of the building how we decide to build up rather than out. Minimizing the footprint of the buildings themselves was one way to avoid impacts. Maximizing avoidance of impacts could also be us holding the location of the existing parkway. The parkway isn't going to be shifting closer to the wetlands, so that buffer zone between the parking lot and the BBW boundary will remain the same. One other thing was reducing impervious surfaces as a way to maximize our avoidance of impacts. And several times during the design, we relocated the buildings so that we could preserve natural vegetation that remained within those buffer zones to the maximum extent practical. As far as mitigation for our impacts, what we came up with was one way was putting erosion control around the entire construction site. That keeps all the sediment within the construction site so it does not exit into the bordering vegetated wetlands during construction. As far as after construction, we propose to take the buffer zone between the parkway and the BVW buffer zone and found a way where our actions could contribute to the interests of the act, that being protection of water quality, flood control and storage, and wildlife habitat by replacing those lawn areas that are frequently flooded with those wet basins, which were proposed to improve water quality by trapping those nutrient loads within those basins prior to flowing into the BVW. Next would be flood control, how those wet basins allow flood waters to enter those basins prior to entering the BVW, which currently the flood waters go directly into the BVW. As far as storage goes, the wet basins have also provided quite an extensive increase in flood storage for flood waters to settle before flowing into the BVW. And finally, the wildlife habitat aspect with the lawn space between Lake Quantapowhat and BVW. Lawn space doesn't have wildlife habitat, even according to the act. It says that lawn spaces have lost virtually all of its wildlife habitat potential. So by putting these wet basins in with berms that have conservation seed mixes, that have flowering herbaceous plants, as well as short trees, such as river birch, yellow birch, swamp white oak, those will provide more wildlife habitat than currently exists within those buffer zones. So overall, we feel like we've contributed to the interests of the act in terms of the flood control and storage, water quality, and wildlife habitat.
It's interesting. I think that in general, conversion to stormwater management of buffer zone isn't really kind of the direction we aim for. I mean, I realize the site is constrained, but this really sort of eliminates any natural buffer vegetation, any any natural vegetated buffer on the site. The project is pretty complete in converting what remains.
Well, I would argue that the portions that we're going to impact are the majority lawn area, which is not really considered a natural setting. There's no trees, there's no herbaceous plants that grow more than 2 inches off the ground. So it really doesn't have much natural appeal to it. Whereas the wet basins, we're adding that into that buffer zone space. we're adding plants, we're adding flood storage capacity and storage. So that's where I believe we're utilizing those lawn spaces and improving them through even though typically you don't picture stormwater management areas within buffer zones as very positive, but in this circumstance, it is, considering right now those lawn spaces aren't helping filter much nutrient loads or store much flood water or provide any wildlife habitat.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure it's a great precedent to, to convert, if you might be better off in the grand scheme, restoring natural vegetation, to buffer zone, rather than utilizing that sort of every inch of that to get your stormwater management.
Well, the stormwater management for the parkway that currently exists is just some swales which take the stormwater from the parkway either directly to the BVW or into the lawn space and then sheet flow off that lawn into the BVW. So with the wet basins, you'd be adding a considerable amount of the flood storage, flood capacity holding and wildlife habitat through inviting those native plants in along the berms there, and by grading that lawn area down to capture those that flood water from the parkway.
And I'll just add to that, Mitch, that we've tried to avoid as much disturbance as possible while still providing some sort of nutrient load reduction in treatment of the stormwater within the parkway before it reaches the wetlands. And because of it's the floodplain that's the issue. The one way to avoid any or minimize the impacts even more would be to raise the whole parkway and divert that water somewhere else before sending it to the wetlands. But it's infeasible to raise the parkway because of the floodplain that exists there today. And so the only option we have is to really leave the parkway where it is and then manage the stormwater to the best of our capabilities. And as we explained before, the only really alternative is to just leave it as it is today. And the trade-off there would be to minimize any sort of impact within the buffer, but then you're sending all that untreated stormwater directly into the wetlands and the perennial stream there, in which discharges directly into the lake.
Well, the other thing you could consider is if you had made a smaller footprint, you could have left room to do the kinds of things that we're interested in. I understand the thing you're gonna say is, well, we went through our analysis and this is what we have to make it profitable or whatever, but that would have been an option.
Yeah, I mean, restoration is always a possibility when you've got a 24 acre site, it's, if the parkway stays where it is, I agree with you, but if making a smaller footprint would be an option.
And part of this thing too is you've converted this into a high intensity use, whereas right now it's not. So you're contributing to part of the problem.
Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, but does our project overall reduce the impervious surface that exists today?
That's correct. Yeah, it's right around an acre of reduced impervious surface on the site.
So we have reduced the footprint that exists today.
What's the traffic load to this project?
I don't believe we have our traffic consultant with us here tonight, and I don't have those numbers
Well, I
on
mean,
hand.
it has to be substantial compared to what it is right now, the way the building is used. I know it's not used at capacity right now. It's not used at all, pretty much, but it's a lower intensity use right now than what it's gonna see. So, and I mean, you're doing a great job at trying to, make this thing work. I'm sure but I still think there probably would have been a project that could have been smaller, that would have given us more flexibility.
At the end of the day, the commission needs to decide whether or not the project meets the performance standards for impacts to the BVW on site, given the extent of work in buffer zone. It's, I hear what you're putting on the table, Mitch. I think it's a good argument. But the regulations sort of instruct us that natural buffer zone is more beneficial to the protection of the interests of the act than a buffer zone that is completely altered. Always reducing the size of the project. If the parcel is kind of stuffed to the gills, to the point where you can't physically protect buffer zone, that might argue that the project is too large for the site. But that's something that the commission will have to wrestle with in determining whether or not the performance standards are met for work in and around BVW on the site.
Time is it? Do you think we want to continue this? And what time is it? It's 9 o'clock. Bob, where's Bob?
Yeah, it's 9:10. We're just about an hour behind.
Yeah,
the
maybe we
next
should,
hearing.
can we take a break and schedule something for the next meeting to continue this? If the applicant wants to.
So could I just ask one question directed more towards the commission members? What are your thoughts on the proposal to put the stormwater management feature in place of the lawn space? Because we're in the stance that by replacing the lawn, we're contributing to the interests of the act by providing improved water quality, more flood control and storage, as well as wildlife habitat. So I was just gonna try and see who agrees with that point.
Can you
Isn't
repeat
the
that,
starting
please?
point is that you've created kind of an either or, that the scope of the project is so big that it creates an either or, either you do go one route or the other, but you can't have both. And so you're asking that starting with that assumption, which do we prefer? Where I think the question that was posited before is, with a smaller project, could we have both?
So we are proposing to reduce impervious surfaces by about an acre, like Nick said. So we have proposed a smaller project than what currently exists on the parcel.
Marginally. But you are creating that thing where as to the stormwater or buffer zone, or habitat, that's the either or that you're asking us to decide between the two, but you're starting with that assumption it's going to be one or the other. And that, I guess, is the premise that I just question the starting point for the question.
Okay. Well, what other commission members think then?
I guess kind of to say it a different way, based on the size of the project presented, you've attempted to provide mitigation for that size project. But like to Matt's point, a different size project would require maybe less mitigation or more natural mitigation and buffer zone. So yeah, I guess, I mean, kind of to Peter's point, it is kind of a, well, based on this project, here's what we can do. But that's based on that project. Project could be looked at differently or scaled back in a way to give more natural buffer or less impact, I guess.
Hi, this is Matt D'Amico from the developer, the proponent. I think if it makes the conversation a little bit easier, I mean, we're happy to look at other stormwater management techniques. You know, if it takes things off the table, we're not, I don't think we'd be ever looking at a reduction in project spot size, especially since, you know, we're currently putting forward a project that is smaller than what's currently on the site and smaller than what was approved by this commission in the last few years. So we'd be happy to look at other solutions that kind of provide for the same outcome, but hope that kind of narrows down that conversation.
And Mitch, do we currently meet all of the performance standards per the
Yes.
Wetlands Protection Act as currently designed? Because
Yes, there was one discussion that Matt Byrne brought up in his peer review letter about riverfront standards, which we can go into. But besides that, we do meet the performance standards for the project. And if you want to,
Yeah, I got it. Oh, it's on the car too. It should be on me now, right? No, but I moved it though, right?
Yeah, so if you want to go into depth on that riverfront area standard, we can. But besides that, I think we're confident enough to say that we meet all the performance standards for the Wetlands Protection Act.
But you work right up to the edge of BVW across the entire site. I mean, you leave no buffer zone untouched. And that doesn't actually meet the performance standards for BVW. You know, 1055-4, says that the expectation is that work in the buffer zone adjacent to wetlands will have an impact unless it's shown that it won't. You know, the burden of proof is on the applicant to demonstrate that the work being proposed won't have an adverse impact on the adjacent wetland. And, you know, given that your stormwater management work goes right up to the wetland edge, wherever there is wetland edge to go to, doesn't meet the performance standards of the Wetlands Protection Act, unless you can, demonstrate that there won't be down the road impacts. And I think that, your argument is you put on the table well, but I think that what you need to do is provide some scientific evidence, proof that what you're proposing won't have a long-term adverse impact on the wetland. It is, you don't want to, I think the commission doesn't want to get into a situation where they're permitting work right to the very edge of all wet BVW on site. Because how does that reflect down the road for other projects that come forward, working right up to the edge of the wetland? That puts them in a difficult spot for permitting projects. If they have, you come in and say, we have to work right up to the very edge of the wetland and we don't have an alternative. That's really not how the regulations read. They're pushing you not to look at the project that you have to have and what impacts you've got to live with, but to avoid impacts, what is the project that you can do here? So I think that to the point of Peter and Bob, you need to flip the argument or flip the discussion, and look at the purpose of the Wetlands Protection Act is to protect the interests of the act in those wetlands, and buffer zones are established with the understanding that they are important to preserving the interests of the act of those adjacent wetlands.
This is Scott Goddard from Goddard Consulting. Mr. Chairman, if I could respond to Mr. Byrne, I'd appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, please go ahead.
So I'm a professional wetland scientist. I presented on this project before. Mitch and I worked together, and we're in collaboration with the engineers in this case and the applicant on the design. I actually would take some issue with Mr. Byrne's opinion on how this project treats buffer zone. I've been in this business for several decades and have worked on literally tens of thousands of projects. And this project does an exceptional steps toward improving an existing condition. This is not a undeveloped forested site that we have suggested working in a very aggressive fashion, right to the very maximum of the buffer zones to the edge of wetlands. We're taking a site there that in this particular case is highly developed with no real stormwater management to speak of. There's very little natural buffers to speak of. And we've done above and beyond the call of duty for this applicant to design a project that takes an existing deteriorated condition and makes substantial improvements to it. If this project does not go forward, these improvements don't occur. And we've demonstrated in prior conditions, the stormwater, I don't want to belabor stormwater, but it's a huge factor in this project. We're taking many acres of untreated stormwater with direct discharges into the wetlands, completely untreated throughout the site. That's been going on for decades. We're removing all of those discharges. And as Nick pointed out, there is a tremendous amount of stormwater infrastructure put on every square inch between the edge of our roadways and these wetlands to treat the stormwater to the maximum extent practicable. And in addition to doing that, it's also creating a vegetated buffer that has a substantial planting program. It has a hydrologic regime. It does provide all the wildlife habitat functions and values that Matt's alluding to. And we're adding a tremendous amount of vegetation throughout this whole site, not just along the wetland edge, but interspersed throughout the balance of the site. We talked about the landscape design plan on the site, and you compare that to existing conditions. It's a tremendous ecological benefit we're adding to the site. Further, the applicant in this case has taken steps to look at the broader lake situation and other opportunities to secure the long-term benefits to the lake. We've talked about invasive species management along the lake. We've talked about substantial amounts of financial contribution to downtown stormwater management to assist on the water quality of the lake. These things are not small. And I would suggest that this project is permissible under the Wetland Protection Act with far less mitigation than we have proposed. I think the applicant's done an exceptional job in this case to demonstrate to the commission that we have improved existing conditions. And to speak directly to Matt's point about impacting wetlands, the wetlands are currently arguably being subjected to ongoing impacts that we're removing and pulling back the work in all cases. There's no direct alteration to BVW proposed in this project, right? If you look at the project design, there's nowhere where we're saying we're altering BVW. There's no fill and replication. There's no standards for wildlife habitat for buffer zone. You know, Matt knows that. That's within the wildlife habitat policy of DEP, but yet we're providing wildlife habitat benefits even to the buffer zone, which is not a performance standard for work in the buffer zone. So I think this applicant should be applauded, quite honestly, and the commission should resoundingly support the type of measures that have been taken in this case to protect buffer zone from every element that we could imagine, and not treat this as if this is a undisturbed native site. Very different situation in this particular case. So there's more to be said on that. I just wanted to address one other item, which is the riverfront. That was one of the other points here. There was a question about riverfront and riverfront performance standards under redevelopment. There's two things I want to say. One, directly to Matt's point about on his comments about redevelopment, but also to take the buffer zone conversation and sort of roll it into riverfront. If you think about section 10.585, which is redevelopment or riverfront, it's treated very differently than 10.584, which is new development within riverfront areas. The logic that's applied in the act as to riverfront area, you know, even though the regs don't protect buffer zones as much as they protect riverfront area is protected more than buffer zones. Okay, that's because that's very clear. It's a resource area versus not a resource area. But to look at the logic that the Wetland Protection Act applies to riverfront area, they say 10.584. Okay, here's the standard to demonstrate no adverse impact. 10%, 5,000 square feet. Stormwater management doesn't have to include toward the square footage, et cetera, all that kind of stuff. But look at what then at 10.584, and we've gone through this in previous hearings on this project. 10.584 is redevelopment of riverfront area. That's what this project is. It's redevelopment. The standards are radically different. Okay, it's not demonstrating no adverse impact. It's not that at all. It's an improvement of existing conditions. So if we meet the improvement of existing conditions for riverfront area, we certainly also meet them for buffer zone, which is not a resource area. So in this particular case, Matt brought up one other question about the redevelopment standards and about pulling work further away from the river. One, I will point out that the river in this particular case is a very degraded system. There's some disconnectivity through 128. There's virtually no flow in this. It's more or less a stagnant channel of water. So it's not a river as we often think of it. Yet we have demonstrated that we are applying 10.585 redevelopment standards and satisfy them. If you look specifically on that left-hand side of the site where the riverfront area is shown, we're pulling the work, and that's how the regulations read, is the work, which includes all of the work, buildings, parking lots, landscaping, you know, pavement, and the drainage in this case. So we're looking at all those what are called degraded surfaces and making sure that we're further from the river than existing conditions. The regulations, however, even allow us, if we wanted to go closer to the river. We're not proposing that in this case. You can go closer to the river when you provide mitigation at a 1-to-1 ratio for impervious surfaces or degraded surfaces, or 2-to-1 if they're not degraded surfaces. We don't even need to go there. But I will point out that even though we are reducing the impervious surfaces within the riverfront area, So that's consistent, by the way, also with that standard that Matt's referring to. And we're not any closer to the river than existing conditions of impervious surfaces because it's defined by the Parkway roadway. We also have those mitigating measures of that land area between the Parkway and the BVW, which is also not just buffer zone, but it's riverfront area. So our additions in those cases of the stormwater management features, revegetated buffer zones meets that standard with in spades. So I don't see that as an issue. So for both the riverfront area, buffer zone issues, improvement, and then overall improvement over existing conditions, the commission can feel comfortable advancing this conversation. So that's all I'd like to say for that, but I'll respond to any other comments or questions the commission has.
I think we should extend this for another meeting.
And as was requested earlier in this hearing, it's certainly our intention to give a written response to the BSC comments. And that seems an appropriate step for us and the engineering team prior to the next meeting. So at whatever point we terminate this conversation tonight, we'll document this in writing for sure.
All right, are there any further questions from the commission? Matt Brand, do you have any more questions or comments at this point?
No, I'd take issue with Scott's discussion about the work within riverfront area. I think that standard 1058.5 D is proposed work, including expansion of existing structures, shall be located outside the riverfront area or toward the riverfront area boundary. So your buildings are, that on the southernmost building is 40 or 60 feet closer to the river. So I don't know how you meet that standard. If you read that, I think that the pavement, if you can, document that the pavement as proposed is not any closer, then that's good. But you still have the issue of buildings. I think that's something that needs to be addressed.
Maybe it might be best we address that in written format with our comments. I mean, I don't, there might be a professional dispute between Matt and I, and maybe him and I can talk about that a little bit offline on some of the interpretation here. But I'm confident we can respond to that in a way that will satisfy Matt and the commission.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments from the commission?
I have a question. Maybe it's not, because I'm still new and I'm still learning, but do you have some sort of certification that you do meet the EPA requirement? Do you, or other than just saying meets?
When you say EPA requirement.
Well, you said you satisfy all the EPA requirements and I keep hearing you meet the standards on this, you meet the standards on that. Do you have an actual paper certification or something that says you do that?
Through the chairman, I think what I'm hearing you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think you mean EPA. I think you mean the DEP, Wetland Protection Act standards.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. Sorry.
So,
yes.
Right. Yeah. We've submitted regulatory reports on compliance early on in this project to go through the Wetland Protection Act, specifically all the standards under riverfront area redevelopment, buffer zone, et cetera, and outlined these items. So at this point, we're now responding to peer review And I'm just reminding the commission at a kind of a high level where we came from, because we've been going at this a while now. So yes, we have submitted those documents, but the response now is going to be very specifically targeted toward whatever gaps in information Matt is seeking further input on.
Okay, thank you. Are there any additional questions or comments from the commission? Are there any questions or comments from the public? I do see a hand raised. Dennis Clarity.
If I may, let's see if I can share my screen. Share. Share file. No. Share screen. Does this work? Can you see this?
No.
No.
Now we can. It's there now.
You can? Oh, you can?
Yes.
Wow. What I live in the old Wakefield Reading Fairgrounds. It shows here. It shows here the. It used to be the Agricultural Association, and that later became the Middlesex South Agricultural Association, and we've been here for a long time. And when they put in Corner Power Parkway, they put a bridge in with water going underneath. And when they built 128, what they did was they put a tunnel, like an 18-inch pipe underneath 95, 128. And the racetrack, which isn't shown on this map, you can just see it here, the old racetrack. It's called the Wakefield Reading Fairgrounds. And right about here, a pipe comes out underneath. Can you see can you see the cursor?
Yes.
And it connects. Here's 128, and it connects to this culvert that ran down the side of the Wakefield Reading Fairgrounds. And now there's going to be a third project in addition to Corner Power Parkway and 128. And I just want to make sure here you can see the water coming down the side of my house. And this drains the whole neighborhood, not just me. Everyone in the neighborhood should be concerned about this, because the water goes under a pipe underneath 128. Then it connects, or used to connect, to this culvert. And I just want to make sure that the water drains into the lake. I mean, whether it goes along the highway and comes through what used to be the Ash River, I believe. It's also the John River and the Eaton River. And I guess they call it Walker's Brook now. And so it may go down to the head of the lake now, but I understand that the culvert is now blocked because for other reasons, and the water goes, rather than downstream to the lake, it's forced upstream into the Reading Drainage Canal. And it goes down the Reading Drainage Canal, and then it goes under 128 and goes into the Saugus River. What I would like is, and I think you would like to work with me on this, hopefully, what I would like is that I want to make sure that that water still reaches the lake, if that is possible. Right now, here is a, can you see this?
Yes.
Okay. Right now, I live in Harvest Road right here. I think I'm the closest house to your property.
Dennis,
And-
what is the date on this drawing, on this map?
This is something I drew myself. This is the date on that drawing. It comes from NOAA, NOAA, North American, whatever, Oceanographic and Atmospheric Association. It's current. And right now,
This drawing that's up on your computer right now is current?
well, I hand drew this. This is, I have what happens now is the water comes down here. It goes under the pipe and it collects.
We can't tell where you're
Oh,
referring to.
okay. It collects in a retention pond. Well, here's a retention pond here.
But we can't tell when you say here and things
Oh.
like that, we don't know.
Oh,
what
you
you're
don't
referring
see
to.
this map?
We see the map, but we don't see a cursor or where you're referring to.
Oh,
Being your map number 24.
Yes.
it's not page 6.
No, and so what is the age of the map with the designation number 24, page 24, or whatever? What is the age of this?
Oh,
Metropolitan Park Commission plan showing proposed route of Parkway along northerly shore of Quannapowitt Lake.
I think I lost my, I think I lost. I'm 75 years old. I'm not very technically proficient. And I think I lost everything and it got horribly screwed up. But anyways, my concern is that I hope the water reaches the lake. And I understand that the Ash River might be flowing backwards into the Reading Drainage Canal. Is that possibly true?
You're talking about you're referring to the
Walker's Brook.
Okay, so that's off the drawing or off the map here. You're not talking about the river on the property then, right?
I wish I'm sorry that, but I've lost my spot here. And it
Mr.
says,
Chairman, this is Scott Goddard. I think I might be able to, I think I understand what the abutter is referring to, and I have some information I might be able to share on it that might help redirect this conversation a bit.
Yes,
That's
you too, Scott.
so there are historical maps like this one here, and I've looked at a bunch of them as well. You know, you can see this is an interesting map too that just shows the site that we're working on is old filled wetland. This was that edge of the park was all BVW many decades ago, and the river that we are dealing with on our site used to many years ago appear to be the primary source of water inflowing into the lake. During the time of the construction of Route 128, there was a number of drainage ditches dug on the other side of 128 from where we are that redirected water, basically what was the Saugus River headwaters, you know, by what appears to, and we field recon this, bypass the lake altogether into the overflow drainage canal. And I think that's what Dennis here is referring to. The water does not appear to convey underneath Route 128 into this ditch and into the lake. So my read on it is that the lake is starved of it's, being fed by a natural water system. It's really being bypassed from how it used to be. And it's probably leads to a lot of its algae problems and stagnation problems because it's not getting overturned and circulated. So there's probably a larger picture at play here that has some truth to it, that is causing straining on the overall health of this lake. And I think that's, it's an interesting scientific discussion, a conversation for the town at large. It's a much bigger conversation than this one project. These actions that have led to the current hydrologic situation of the lake are off-site from our property and not related to this development. So though I think it's very interesting, and I think that there's some merit for sure to what Dennis, I think, is highlighting here. And if I'm on the Conservation Commission and putting myself in your shoes, I'm thinking, these are the kind of questions that probably should be looked at on a town-wide scale. But it is something I also think is well beyond the scope of this project and this hearing. I would like to narrow our focus to our subject site and whether we're making our own incremental improvements to the extent that we have the ability to on our site, rather than just opening it up to something much broader as it relates to the importance of the overall lake. We are doing our part and then some, as I mentioned earlier, with our improvements both on site and off-site with our downtown improvements as well. So I would like to maybe steer the conversation slightly away from where it's heading down right now, still recognizing though that this is a valid point overall for the lake, but not so much for this project. Thank you.
Scott, question. The lack of flow in the river right now, could that be being impacted by pretty much what you've just said and what Dennis presented?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So the river that used to flow down through this channel has been effectively cut off by Route 128. And then
No.
And there's still a pipe there, but there's a diversion channel that you can see very clearly, both in the field and on the aerial photographs, that divert it on the other side of the highway around the lake. And that's why, in my opinion, you see an absence of flow in this channel.
Okay.
It's basically what we're left with is a remnant stagnant ditch. That's what we have.
Agree with that.
That's not true at all. I don't believe.
There is very little flow happening in that river right now.
Yeah, but that's because it's been material has been dumped into the. Did you get the comments I shared with the committee? No.
Who are you asking that question to?
Mr. Romano.
Oh, like a month or two ago?
It was dated 12/8. I think Rebecca Davis said that she was going to withhold it so that you wouldn't get confused until the next meeting.
I'm not sure, Dennis, if you've seen those or not.
Okay. Resume share. Oh, there we go. Now, do you see? Oh God. Do you see where Harvest Road is here on this map? Is my cursor going?
No, we still see the original file drawing. Quinnipiac Lake Metropolitan drawing.
Okay. How about share file? No, that's well, this is very frustrating. But what I'm asking is that I prefer that when this project, if this project goes through, that water flows underneath the highway and it reaches the lake. Right now, I don't believe it does reach the lake. And I believe it goes down goes down next to one, it collects on the in retention ponds because the Reading Drainage Canal cannot handle, I don't believe the Reading Drainage Canal can handle all that water. So it collects on retention ponds on Quannapowa Parkway and eventually either percolates into the ground or it goes along the drainage canal down to what used to be the Ash River, which is now called the Walker's Brook. And I wonder, now, is this river that used to flow the Ash, Eaton, John Street Brooks, which is now called Walker's Brook, is this a river or is it part of the drainage canal? Does anyone know? No.
No, that's on the other side of 128 on the Reading side, correct?
Well, whoa, I wish I could share my screen.
Dennis, would it help if you prepared some questions for us that we could
yes,
discuss and
okay,
maybe have the applicant help us potentially answer?
Okay, I have some questions. Well, other than that, I would prefer that my drainage go down to the lake. Is Walker's Brook, as it flows, as it used to flow to the lake, but is now blocked, is it part of the Reading Drainage Canal, or is it a river? That's one question. And two, is Quannapowa Parkway a private way or is it a public way? That's the second question. And the third question is this walkway here public property? Or is it under the control of the selectmen and subject to being sold?
And some of those questions are not related to this hearing, so you.
Oh, okay.
You're gonna have to throw out a couple of them. I think the first one we might be able to answer.
Oh, thank you very much. And thank you for your time. And I appreciate what you're doing. And hopefully I'll be able to make a little progress in sharing my screen, which would be very helpful to all parties. And I'm looking forward to learning. Thank you for your time, guys.
Okay, thank you, Dennis.
Mr. Chairman, to what extent would you like any of this topic handled from our end with a written rebuttal?
Which topic are you talking about?
You know, the historical flow of the channel and all that kind of good stuff.
And the question is what? What do we? How do
Well,
we
I'm just
wanna-
wondering to what extent would you like the applicant to respond to those topics? I mean, in my estimation, you know, a lot of this is a broader question than is applicable to this specific project.
Mhm.
And, you know, it does have some interesting historical and cultural and scientific significance to the lake for sure. But I'm wondering to what extent we want to enter into that conversation as it relates to this hearing process for this project.
If you think it's in some way connected, I would think that you could give a written response. If you think there's enough of a connection with this project. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I mean, I guess my thinking is that it's not connected to this project. We only happen to be a site that, you know, historically had water pass through it from these drainage areas that are being discussed. So insofar as that's a connection, that's the extent of our connection. But we have no, you know, control or intends to alter offsite conditions to change the overall drainage basin and flow patterns to the lake, that's a much more significant study that the town would have to contemplate and coordinate with the town of Reading and Mass Highway and everything else. So there's a significant questions that are raised there, but just I think beyond the scope of this hearing process.
Have you looked at some of these flows or lack of flows off the property?
Yes, I've done my own historical analysis to understand how this has transpired, and then done field reconnaissance to understand the flow patterns that exist, on and off site.
Do you have something you could share with us?
Well, I would have to turn that into some kind of a report, but it's only very cursory because there's a lot more that can be done on this.
Right. Yeah, I'm not looking for a full-blown study.
Yeah, I can probably give you a little bit to maybe a series of historical aerial photographs to show the changes that have occurred over the years, something like that.
And then some observations that you've,
Yeah.
seen in the field or whatever.
I think that's reasonable.
Okay, that would be good. Because there is obviously a bigger issue here concerning the lake that, we all are aware of.
I just don't want to go too far down a
Yeah,
tangent, that's all.
no, I understand. We're not solving all the lake's problems, tonight. Okay. All right, are any other questions from the public? Okay, we would like to continue until February 10th. That would be the next meeting. And you will submit the written responses to BSC's comments before that, or do you need more
Yes.
time?
Yep, before that is fine. Can you give me a date that you'd need that by?
Rebecca, is there a particular day you'd want that by?
Well, I guess it's as soon or with as much time for you guys to review it.
Yeah,
So would you
could be-
want it by the Tuesday of that week? Is that enough time, or would you like it earlier?
Yeah, we'd also like Matt to be able to review it too.
Yeah, I'll aim for a week from today, which would be a week before the next hearing.
Okay, that should be sufficient.
That'd be
Hey,
great.
Scott,
Yes,
if you could just look at 10.531, because I think it really talks about buffer zones and the performance standards related to adjacent resource areas that
Well-
might be interested in looking at.
yep, happy to, thank you.
Okay, we'll continue until February 10th. We'll see you then, and we'll look forward to the responses you send in.
Thank you, have a good night.
I thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Matt.
You're welcome.
All right, next we have EP 313602, and that's 237 Water Street. Public hearing continued, notice of intent to reconfigure pavement and add car vacuum stations. Do we have the applicant here?
Good evening, John Oberon with Hayes Engineering. We represent the applicant and the owner of the property, Lenny DiOrlando. I don't believe he's on tonight. The last, basically at the last hearing, there was 3 kind of outstanding comments or revisions that were requested on the plan. I sent over a revised plan today. I can share my screen. I'd like to just go over what those, basically the 3 changes were.
Go ahead, John. You can share.
All right. So one of the comments was, I believe Elaine made it, that we had showed on this planting detail an area of wildflowers. She was concerned that they would continue kind of in the future to maintain as wildflowers and not essentially die out. So it was requested that we replace that with some additional common witch hazel, which we had already proposed. So basically added 5 bushes in this area to replace the wildflowers. The other comment, there was discussion, recall that we're proposing basically a trash fence along the edge of the river between the parking lot and the river. And there's discussion about the height of that fence. So we propose to basically increase the height of that fence to 6 feet along basically this section through here. And then it will go back down to 4 feet in this section out by Water Street. So I think that addresses what the comments in regards to the fence. And then the last comment was to take a look at the water flowing off of the site, and if there was a way to put some sort of berm or curbing along this edge of the existing pavement, or the proposed edge of pavement, basically. And I did take a look at that. I did take a look at the actual spot shots that we had there, and there is an area kind of in here that it's a little bit lower, so it doesn't necessarily flow either towards Water Street or back towards the basically the infiltration trench along the back. So in order to do that, we would have to raise the grade along this edge of pavement. And looking at the curbing, adding curbing, there's a lot of concern about the amount of impervious area on the site, and we are reducing it. So curbing along the edge of the existing edge of pavement, that interferes with the vacuum, basically the concrete bases for the vacuum. So we'd have to move those away from the edge of pavement, and then obviously leave some room between the curbing and that concrete base to allow water to flow. So long story short, when I started details, it means that we would have to move everything probably about 2 to 3 feet towards the building. And the site is actually very tight in terms of aisle widths and maneuvering space. So that solution didn't seem to really work out. So I looked at, instead, I've added some proposed spot shots along this edge of pavement to essentially raise this edge of the pavement up. I think at the most it's about 4.5 inches or so, to create basically so that the water doesn't flow towards the river. It will flow almost like we're creating a gutter in this area in here, so that it will flow back towards essentially the building, and then eventually flow over the pavement towards Water Street or back towards the rear of the property. And I've shaded in this area basically the extent of where this basically overlay pavement. When they do this, they'll probably have to do some scarifying of the existing pavement to be able to get it to slope down into this proposed gutter. So essentially those are the 3 changes that we discussed at the previous meeting.
John, I hate to throw this out here, but I had another idea. and you can shoot it down if you want, but what about a rain garden along that edge? Is there space for something like that instead? I mean, that provides pollutant take up, which would be, I think, an improvement. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's something, and you're talking about instead of really doing any reworking of the pavement, take that area that's where the kind of the low point there, and in the grass area between the pavement and
Yeah, get rid of the grass and put in plants or something.
but put a slate depression in there and allow it to fill up with water, and then it's eventually
Yeah,
just toward the river.
I don't know, see what someone thinks about that idea. I know the other one wasn't too good.
I mean, we're not talking about unfortunately a very wide strip
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah, I guess they do it in strips like that because of Quantipower Parkway, they're doing it all over the place. Anyone have comments or something?
So we're talking a wet basin or a rain garden or?
Rain garden, not a wet basin. You wouldn't be able to do a wet basin, not without going through a list of things, disclaimers. Like they were doing.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably about 4 feet or so of width there, so we don't want, I mean,
Rebecca, what do you think? Are you still there?
I am. John, did you have to go to the ZBA to change this, to have this new plan?
we have not been to the ZBA, no.
Are you guys planning on going?
We are planning on, yes.
Okay.
We actually have an attorney on board, basically ready to go. We're gonna file. We were trying to get a little further along with the conservation before we went to the ZBA.
Would it be appropriate to wait until the ZBA?
Well, we kind of go through this, been through this in the past. Technically we should file with them. However, in the past, when we've dealt with this, especially, the 50-foot from a bank of a stream, any structures within 50 feet, the first question they ask me is, well, what does Concom think of this? What's the Conservation Commission think of it? So, it's much better to go in there talking, to discuss it with the ZBA, having, basically hash things out with the Conservation Commission beforehand.
Can I ask you, John, what kind of relief are you looking for from the ZBA besides the 50-foot issue?
It's the 50-foot, and this is what the attorney's looking into as far as, I believe there was a special permit issued for this site originally, and we are altering the parking. We're actually losing one parking space, so I guess it needs to be looked at whether the special permit also may need to be amended.
Yeah, and I guess one issue is whether or not, I understand you'd like our input, but we'd like their input, because we may be looking at a different project depending on what they say.
I mean, potentially, yes. I mean, it's where you got to start somewhere, I guess. I mean, one of the things too that we were kind of, I don't know if you know, but there was a warrant on town meeting for basically eliminate that requirement for the 50-foot.
Yep.
So we were kind of waiting to see how that plays out. I think it's coming back up again in the spring town meeting. So that may be relief that we don't need to, if that happens, then we may not need to get that relief.
It's just tough looking at this project, especially after talking about what happened in the riverfront area after the last public hearing, John, to see what's going on here. I understand you're reducing the impervious surface, right, on this within the riverfront area?
Correct. We're reducing about 195 square feet.
But you're increasing the intensity of the use by putting vacuum stations right next to the river. So it's just a tough project. It's hard.
Well, we also looked at, doing some enhancements. I mean, that's kind of why we did the plantings down in here where there was a section of the riverfront area that there wasn't much in terms of vegetation, and basically trying to make improvements along that part of the buffer or that riverfront area.
Rebecca, did you, I may have missed it. Did you answer Jimmy's questions about your thoughts on what he suggested for the vegetated strip or swale or?
Nope, I diverted and asked if he had been to the ZBA.
Oh.
I think you guys should wait until they at a minimum apply to the ZBA, as is typically done and cited in the regulations, and that simultaneously we can have some conversations to see, John, if they need to change that special permit or not. So when would you apply to the ZBA in the event, let's suppose you got something from the commission, when would you go to the ZBA?
Maybe not until spring, John said, I think.
I mean, we would apply, again, I'm a little torn because if the warrant gets put on spring town meeting, then, we may not want to go rush to the ZBA and we may want to wait to see if that passes.
So that means we have some time here then, right? There's something pressing here. I mean, you're planning on waiting a little while.
I mean, I would have to talk to my client.
Fair enough.
As far as, he may be of the mind, well, let's just go to the ZBA and apply for that variance, regardless of what's going to happen in the future, and go forward with it that extent. Depending on what happens tonight, I would planning to meet with the attorney and go over and see what his opinion is about what other, what might be required from the special permit side, and whether this can be done with a finding through the ZBA and not a formal hearing. But I haven't had that discussion yet.
Hey, on a different note, I did actually go by there over the weekend, and the automated bay, there is water leaking out of that automated bay and flowing back towards the swale and back to the parking spots. It is slightly graded that direction. So I don't know if there's a bad seal on that door or what, but there was soapy water coming back towards the swale and not heading towards the street side.
So I'm trying to remember from the aerials, it looked like it was this.
Yeah. I actually drove by there over the weekend. I could see it. It's coming out of that bay.
All right, I will mention that to the applicant.
And there is a slight grade down towards the swale from that concrete pad or the asphalt. But yeah, it's definitely leaking out from underneath that door.
Well, that's good. That was the intent, that it should head toward the swale, so.
But it should be, the door should be sealing against the concrete too.
What do we have left on the agenda? Bob?
We've got our other business and some tree removal requests.
Okay,
There's 3 other topics.
okay. So John, what do you want to do?
Well, I would like to, at least my goal tonight was to get some direction from the commission, whether you were, if my solution of creating, raising the pavement along the edge of the river slightly to get it to grade back to the, the paved surfaces. Or as you brought up, we could look at some sort of vegetated swale along that edge of pavement.
Okay, so, well, I'm inclined to go with Rebecca's judgment, so,
On
whether,
On-
yes,
hearing what the ZBA says.
yeah,
Okay. I am concerned that even a slight change in grade in an area is going to result in freezing across that driveway area.
I'm thinking the rain garden's a better idea, though.
That's what I'm thinking, because I just, if cars come out of the car wash and go to the vacuum station stripping, that water's going to freeze up. And I don't
Yeah.
think it'll be graded enough to get it towards the street.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, and it is fairly flat along that edge, which makes it, that's why when looking at the regrading, I'd have to, we want to raise it up to get sure that it's going to flow the direction we want it to flow.
Or you'd have to put some sort of French drain in there to connect to the system or something. Because I just don't know if the water would get where it needs to get without ponding or freezing. So
Where would that be on the plan?
So Jimmy's talking right on the other side of that fenced area. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be just on the other side of the fence. Basically between the edge of pavement and the existing, there's a arborvitae hedge that's grown along there. It would be in that strip there.
Okay, thank you.
It does seem to make more sense to do something like that.
Yeah.
well, let's do something because we should do something.
Yeah, so what are you suggesting, that John file with the ZBA?
Well, John, are you opposed to that? Is that something you want to think about?
Yeah, I do want to discuss it with the attorney and my client.
Why don't you talk to them first, and then at the next meeting, we'll put you on the agenda and you can tell us what you want to do. And then we'll probably tell you that you need to go with the Board of Appeals.
Should he have a rain garden design ready to go?
Yeah, if you think that's reasonable, I'm throwing out ideas. I don't know what anyone thinks of these ideas, but you know, if you agree, say so. If you don't, say
Well, I already
so.
said, I think it's a better solution than trying to regrade because getting water out of that area, I think just gonna create a icing hazard.
So you want to modify this map to show it, and do you still want them to go before the Board of Appeals? Or do you want to do it now? What are you saying?
Well, I think you could make that modification, have that
For the
already,
Board of Appeals?
yes.
Okay,
I agree.
okay.
And check the seal on that door, that bay.
Yes.
All right, so why don't we do that then?
All right, so we'll schedule this also to be continued to the next hearing unless we hear otherwise from John.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'll make a motion. That's the motion I'm making.
what are you making a motion for?
I don't have to move things along. It's getting late.
We're continuing till February 10th, unless John lets us know before then to, keep it continued.
Remy, say hi. Hi, Remy, say hi. You say hi.
Are we good, John?
Hey, Remy? Yeah, see, big boy. Huh?
We don't see anything, Jimmy.
Yeah, we
You're
can't
blacked
See my
out.
dog?
Blacked out. We can't
That's not
see the
moving
dog.
things along, Jimmy.
Yeah, Jimmy, you've been blacked out the whole meeting.
You can't see my dog right now?
We see nothing.
No,
What the heck?
We haven't seen you the whole time. The last 3 hours, we haven't seen you.
Really?
Yeah, do you still have a tape across the screen?
It's been great.
The privacy screen's been working
Yeah, the
effectively.
screen's still on.
You could have told me to go home if you
I hit
felt
the
that
post it
way.
out of there.
Are we all set with John?
Yeah, I think probably.
Okay,
simple.
moving
All
along.
right. Thank you. Good
All
night.
right, John, thank you. Good night.
Right.
All right, those that are here for 9 o'clock, 109 Farm Street, it's been postponed until February 10th. And those that are here for 313607 Lake Street, Foundry Development, that has been postponed until further notice. Okay, that brings us to other business. DEP 313-452-134 Greenwood Street, request for a certificate of compliance. Oh, this is the house right before Linden Street on Greenwood.
I have a question on this. They did submit a request for certificate of compliance. That was requested based on a letter that I had sent out. I periodically, if I have a free moment, go through the files to see what hasn't been finished or closed out with their certificate of compliance. So I sent out about 6 or 7 letters last week or the week before. This homeowner responded. They built an addition many moons ago. The applicant, I think probably at the time, hired someone to file their notice of intent for them. They were unaware of the certificate of compliance requirement, which seems somewhat typical. I explained it to him. They do not have he doesn't have an as-built plan. Elaine, he submitted pictures to me. Looks like they put the addition on the side of the house where it was supposed to go. And Elaine's gonna go check it out to make sure that the site is stabilized. I am wondering what you guys would like to see in terms of an as-built. I checked with the building department for the addition. They don't have one either. Just wondering, the original plan that was submitted with a notice of intent, I think had handwritten dimensions and on it. And so I don't know that he hired anyone originally to do any type of survey work. So I'm questioning what type of as-built information you guys would like to see.
Well, can we check the dimensions of the foundation of the addition against the original plan?
Sure, we can go out and measure.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's attached to the house.
All right.
So it should be.
Who's
easy
gonna
enough
do the
to
measuring?
validate.
Elaine,
Who's doing the measuring?
Elaine's gonna do the measuring.
Okay.
Is there anything else that needs to be
building
measured?
permit for an addition without having a real plan?
I'm sorry, say that again.
How did it get a building permit for the addition without a real plan?
A great question.
I don't understand that.
I don't know either.
That's crazy.
I don't know if, I don't know the answer to that. All I can tell you is I sent an email. I said, do you have any type of as-built plan for this addition? And they said no. So, okay.
There was a permit pulled though, right?
So sometimes I have access, well, I do have access to the building permits, and I did go through and look for one under his name, and I didn't see one. I could be searching incorrectly. I'm not super savvy on the building permits. They use Viewpoint. I did see that they got a building permit in 2000. I don't have any more information than that. I don't know if they pulled a building permit or not. I assume they did. It's an addition.
Yeah, because even if they didn't have a plan, the permit would, specify the dimensions of the addition. It would write them out. It would say 21 by 21, whatever.
Well, I mean, I don't think that the homeowner would be opposed to Elaine going there and just checking that it's, within the realm of what it was supposed to be compared to the filing.
Okay.
She will double check to ensure that the site is stable and there's nothing else funky going on. If you guys are comfortable, because it's a little bit different, that's not a formal as-built plan. But if you guys are comfortable with that, she can present that at the next meeting.
What year do we issue the order of conditions?
Yeah, that was a great question. Hold on. I can tell you, let's see, it says 452. Let me just look it up and I can get that for you in a matter of a minute or two.
Is it older than 3 years ago? Then we can't issue a certificate of compliance, right?
No, it's, what do you mean?
Don't they have to, they would have to have done the work within a certain period of time. We don't, right?
Yeah, there are a lot of outstanding orders of conditions. That's why every now and again I go through and try to find them, because it's the only way to close out the file. If we want to talk about something else while I look at this up, we can do that. Or if you guys would like to pause, I'm just going to pull it up.
Well, also, if Elaine's going out there, I don't know what was done for, sediment controls, if there's silt fence, up or anything like that. But I mean, if they're all done and stable and there's a silt fence, there's no need to keep that there.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I think it's their backyard, so I doubt that's probably still there. This is file number 452. We're up in the 600s. So I don't, she'll certainly check for that, but I would doubt that would still be there, but we can check for that too. Just give me a second. I'll look up 452.
This is probably like 5 years ago.
It was a lot longer than that.
Really?
Yeah. It was like 2011 or something, 2007, something like that.
Wow.
Oh, it's going backwards. 452.
I remember the project. I just didn't seem like it was that long ago.
Well, it was recorded in 2007.
Wow.
So yeah, 2007.
Wow.
Right.
All right, so we'll just put that on the next one with Elaine's information, if you guys are okay with that.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we could go to the next one.
Yeah, tree removal requests, 2 of them.
Let me just go
21.
back. I think did I cross out New Salem Street culvert?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't see that on here.
Okay, I'll just tell you real quick if you guys don't
You
mind.
did cross it out.
Okay.
Cross that, okay.
Oh, yeah, it's crossed out.
So the reason why I crossed it out is because it's still a little bit of an ongoing, but let me tell you what is happening. And then it'll probably be clarified and fixed up at the next meeting. Say again?
My head.
So anyway, so Bill put in a request for certificate of compliance for the New Salem Street culvert. And Elaine went out to take a site visit and she had some comments. He did provide an as-built plan. He also has the engineering letter that talks about that it's in substantial compliance. So when Elaine went out to do the site visit, she noticed that there was still some erosion control kind of paraphernalia hanging around, and that there was kind of like a lump of dumped concrete. So she came back to the office, called and said, you guys need to take care of that before we'll issue it. Received a phone call back from the representative. She let me know that that erosion control and dumped concrete is not part of their project. They believe it was from another project on New Salem Street that's currently ongoing. So Elaine got back to them and said that or contacted that person on New Salem Street, asked if they could get all that stuff removed. Ultimately, if the other owner doesn't remove it, she's going to ask the town to remove it. And so that's why it was not on for tonight. And it's on again for the next one, based on waiting for the removal of the erosion controls and the dump concrete. So just so you know.
Okay.
Okay.
Never a dull moment on New Salem Street.
Never.
True. Very true.
All right, so you have 21 Heritage Lane, but then it's crossed out.
Yep. The homeowner asked to be postponed because this meeting was too late. We had too many things on the agenda at the time that I posted it, and he, understandably, and because I had told him that he just has to sit there and wait till the end of the meeting. So he's like, I'll just go to the next one. Now, I'm not certain that February 10th will be any lighter than
It's gonna be worse.
I was gonna say, please call him and thank him for it.
So he will certainly be on the agenda. Whether or not there's a strikeout, you guys will see.
Okay, that brings us to 138 Salem Street.
Yes. So 138 Salem, the owner called to request information about the tree policy. Elaine went out to go check it all out. Apparently it's within the riverfront with the exception of 2 of the trees that are outside of the jurisdiction. The jurisdiction is the riverfront, and there are 12 mature oaks that the homeowner would like to remove. Elaine said that they're all healthy. I think I forwarded you pictures today.
Yes, you did.
Okay. So you guys have an idea. I was under the impression that the homeowner was going to come to speak to you tonight. It is 10:30, so I don't know.
Hi, can you hear me? Good evening. Hi, this is Joe Albert. I am the owner of 138 Salem Street here. So just quickly as a backdrop, you're correct, right? These are 12 mature oaks. If you've seen pictures of the property, right? So this is a rental property. It's a 4-family 138 Salem. It's been in my family for the last 30 years or so. I've really become, predominant owner here the last 5 years. My father passed away, and it's been a property we're trying to, remodel at this point on the inside here. And if you look around, I mean, there are, at least 10 of these 12 are all in a really close proximity to the actual structure of the home, right? And both the base of the trees and obviously all the canopies as well. And I was under the assumption that, from the riverfront jurisdiction, and I know this is really haven't done any kind of formal filing here, not understanding if we needed to, just from a tree removal perspective, but I believe we're beyond 200 feet from the riverfront area there. I mean, at the end of the day, we're trying to, from a safety perspective, from a liability perspective, really, as I continue to rent the property, I'd like to, remove these trees, give a little bit of open area behind the home now, because as I rent to potentially some families and so on, to have some open, the property is flat. So there's really no, kind of, sort of storm, water kind of related issues here. And that's the predominant reason that I'd like to be able to remove these trees is to, they've really lived a long life, especially the 2 that are on the left side of the property. If I'm looking at it, that are right on my property line, adjacent to my driveway. One of them hangs over Salem Street pretty aggressively. And it's really always been an inconvenience, both for visibility purposes and so on. So, that's the backdrop on the reasoning that we'd like to be able to, to remove these trees.
So, Rebecca, do we know for a fact that it's in the riverfront? I can't hear anyone.
You're on mute, Rebecca.
that's because I'm on mute. Sorry. Elaine told me that she did like a quick measurement on the aerials and determined that most of the trees were in the riverfront. There were some, however, I think that he pointed out on the other side of the driveway that are beyond your jurisdiction.
Is that in the group that he wants to take out?
I think there's both. He
Yes.
mentioned all the trees he wanted to take out, some of which were not in your jurisdiction. So of course we wouldn't say anything about those. The other ones towards the back of the house, and if you're looking at the house, maybe to the back, and I would assume towards the right, if you're looking at it, those were, according to her measurements online, those were within the riverfront. Some of them were, yeah.
Yeah, so where are we? Which house?
So it's there, correct? And so we're talking about essentially, if you can, I've got a lot plan. If you'd like me to bring up, I could do that, but which actually does illustrate many of the trees.
Yeah.
But it's
You can share your screen.
I can't share until somebody stops.
2 houses down, right?
2 houses down, correct? It's the one.
opposite
It's one
side.
home, and then it's beyond the commercial property as well. It's right along the railway. It's right along the railway, the old railway.
Right. So the riverfront is not on the side on the side of your driveway where the trees are. It's on the opposite side of the house.
On that side.
The opposite
Correct.
side of your house. That's that's farthest from the driveway. Okay.
So this is give me 1 second. Can you see this picture?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So I did have the property kind of resurveyed just because it's grandfathered non-conforming, and as part of the new ownership kind of changes I've made here. So essentially, these are the 2 trees that are right on the property line on the front right side. The riverfront in question here is, so this is the second property, this is the railway, and then it's over this, it's right, it's over this to the left here. And so this is the area behind the home, which all of these, especially these ones here, this one here, and there's an existing little tree house here, but these ones all, I mean, you're talking about probably 25 feet to the back of the property with some significant canopy, as you can see from that other aerial photo that, extends over the home. Adjacent to me, the property next to me here is essentially cleared all of the trees here already. And so, kind of has a bit of a grass yard, and that's kind of what we're hoping to achieve here. So, there's lots of trees in the back of the property and so on that would exist. If we had to put back some trees, more just for that purposes, I'm open to doing that. It's just really, these are, significant trees extending a large canopy, it's shade. I got mold issues on the back, stuff like that I just need to open up this area here.
And yeah, so the river is actually 2 properties over.
Correct.
So none of these trees are providing canopy to a wetland or the river.
Correct.
Rebecca, what do the regulations say?
This is more under your tree policy.
Yeah, well,
I mean, some of these definitely, I have to believe, are 200 feet away, more than 200 feet away.
Correct. That was what the surveyor told me myself. I don't have that on this piece because we didn't actually flag a wetland or anything like that.
So wait a minute, this is the second house. There's a commercial property, a house, and then this property, correct?
Correct. There's this house. There's a house here there's a house here on the property here, and then there's the commercial driveway of the property that goes in the back. This big circle here.
Yep.
So there's actually the riverfront is actually where it says condo 138 Salem there. And that's really where the actual railway is.
Right. We actually walked that railway a couple of years ago.
Right. I mean, it's pretty well cleared over here, and then there's obviously lots of woods still that run all the way through to the back to New Salem Street. That would obviously remain intact. It's really just the large perimeter around the home. and trying to open up the backyard a little bit is what we're trying to accomplish.
But it's unclear how many of these are within 200 feet though. So how we,
Yeah, that's what we don't know.
I know, so how can we, we're at a disadvantage.
I guess I wasn't,
Let's see.
I'm more than happy to come back with that. I wasn't, again, we're not building any, I wasn't aware that that was a necessary thing here coming into that, to actually, for each tree.
Well, yeah, that determines whether it's jurisdictional or not.
That determines whether we can say anything about it at all. If it's not within 200 feet, we have no say in it.
Okay.
Who did the plot plan with the location of the trees for you?
That was, if you give me 1 second, I'll give you that.
Because they can easily
Right.
give a 200-foot line off the riverfront area onto this drawing, and that'll answer the question. They may even have some of that information already. We can scale it.
I think we lost him.
No, he's
I apologize. I just dropped off. Yeah, so Hayes Engineering is the one that did the survey plus, so I could certainly follow up with that information.
yeah, ask Hayes to throw the 200-foot riverfront line on the drawing, and that'll answer the
It
question.
looks like John Ogley is still on the line.
Yeah,
he's still
John,
on.
it's John. Oh, is John on? Okay.
Yeah.
he's still on. Yeah.
Making connections.
John, did you hear all that? He's muted.
Yeah.
He never left us.
All right, we're gonna move on now.
No, I was not listening. I was trying to find out why there was soapy water going out of the bay.
You're eavesdropping on us, John. We know.
The
You're
mob.
spying.
Get them up.
We were talking bad about you, and we thought you were gone.
Are you guys talking about 138?
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah,
we are, John. Just
can you put the 200-foot riverfront buffer on that drawing?
I can do approximate 200-foot buffer, yeah.
Yeah, that'll work.
Yeah, as we haven't really looked at it as from, wetlands resource.
right.
Yeah, we just kind of did an existing conditions plan at this point.
So some of those trees may be outside of our jurisdiction.
Okay. If the trees are within the 200-foot buffer, is there something that, some advisory piece from the commission around those trees that are within?
Is that if they're live trees, they need to be replaced, especially close.
Okay.
Sometimes, I mean, it just depends. We don't like to see live trees cut down. In general.
Yeah, we could get you a copy of the policy, and you could see what the replacement policy would look like. Shrubs or whatever the case may be. But the first step would be to get the 200-foot line put on the drawing, and then we can see what we're actually dealing with.
Okay.
Our tree removal policy is on the Concom website, Joe. So.
Okay. Understood. So why don't, if I can, I'll just table this and ask for another to be on another future agenda, and we'll follow up with there.
Okay. Sounds good. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Rebecca, that's all I see on the agenda. Do you have anything else?
No.
Judy, do you have anything else?
Nope.
Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Ken,
Yes.
Savannah,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Teresa,
Yes.
Jimmy.
Yeah.
I also vote to adjourn. All right.